And yeah, good afternoon, everyone. I believe we have people from all over the world joining today for this interesting webinar, uh, where we will talk about abandoned, orphan, and abandoned wells and how it is important to finally closing them properly to tackle climate change. My name is Juan Duran. I'm your moderator for this session. I am the CEO of EcoRegistry. Happy that you all joined together and happy to have you all here. So it's very exciting lineup of speakers that we have today that will provide us a lot of valuable insights about this topic and why it is important to focus on closing orphan and abandoned wells. So through the webinar, please, we encourage all participants to be very active and feel free to ask any question. We will be capturing all those questions in real time so that we can give you some time at the end with the panelists to discuss about the questions that you have. So in our discussion, we have today Sinat Iqbal from ACX, Sam Arnold from Carbon Path, and Michael Martin from the Orphan Well Management Association. So we will have first three presentations from each one of them. And the first one will come from Michael Martin, a seasoned leader in energy and sustainability, that brings a wealth of experience to his role as a member of the Orphan Well Management Association. With extensive experience spanning Google's APAC energy, infrastructure, and sustainability division, Martin has demonstrated a commitment to addressing environmental challenges within the energy sector. His strategic prowess and dedication to driving meaningful change make him a valuable asset in tackling the pressing issue of orphan wells and advancing responsible well management practices. So please, Michael, I will leave you to your presentation and I hope to learn a lot from it.
Thanks, Juan. And as you mentioned, my day job is working for Google on their energy and location strategy team. But today I'm here in my capacity as a co-founder of the Orphan Well Management Association. So let me go and bring up those few slides that you were speaking about. Just bear with me. So this is actually a really powerful graphic brought to us by our friends at the Environmental Defense Fund. And what it's showing you is where you find documented orphan wells peppered throughout the United States. And I say documented because for every one documented well that we have, there are some estimates out there that we probably have 10 undocumented wells. And it's really a relic of the past in the sense that before you had the American Petroleum Institute create its system of record, you had thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of wells that were not recorded down in any annals with any government authorities of note in a systematized manner. So these are constantly being found and discovered and causing tumult for those that find themselves in close proximity to them. Now, it's important to go and define what an orphan well is. And I won't read what we have here on this slide, but basically the TLDR is that the owner or operator is unwilling or unable to go and plug and abandon such a well. The name is evocative. It causes you to go and feel a sense of emotion because when we think about orphans, their owners, their parents are not in a position for one reason or another to go and provide them the care that they need. Now, this is coming from the US government. And what they note is that we have millions of Americans across the country, let alone the world, that live within just 1 mile of these orphan oil and gas wells. And when you think about what the negative externalities are associated with this, you start thinking about environmental hazards, you start thinking about public health and safety issues associated with contamination of groundwater, the emissions that are associated with it, be it methane or some other nasty, volatile chemicals like benzene, some carcinogens, things that you really don't want to go and be in close proximity to. And those are the invisible things that we're often able to go and find through environmental analysis. But some of the more obvious things that we can go and see to the eye are leftover equipment, sinkholes, um, other things that are going to go and cause physical harm to humanity and wildlife. And when you think about it from an economic perspective, what it's doing is it's actually causing the economic degradation of the lands where you find these orphan wells. But the thing that's interesting about that is then one would have to go and start thinking, if we're thinking about this from an economic condition and perspective, can we actually go and view this problem as something more than that, an opportunity? And this is where it becomes interesting because when we think about that opportunity, a lot of times, and appropriately so, people gravitate towards the offsets that can go and be created by doing this work. And this is a really powerful thing because the offsets that are created from doing this work in terms of plugging these wells checks the box in terms of the four pertinent criteria in terms of what is a high quality offset. That's additionality, leakage prevention, permanence, and verifiability. So while it's not as sexy as some of the other offsets out there, it really has a lot of proven attributes that can go and make it a certain value creating mechanism that folks want to go and pursue in terms of those that are trying to go and figure out how to go and create a business around this. And when we think about creating a business around this, we start thinking about all the different stakeholders that are involved. And one of my colleagues over at the Orphan Well Management Association, Stacy Taruccio, came up with this slide. And I think it's pretty powerful because it's really the impetus behind why we wanted to go and create the trade association, which is the Orphan Well Management Association, a licensed 501c6. We want to go and be a convener. We want to go and bring all these parties together so that we can actually go and create a system that allows for the problem to go and be resolved at scale with expedience rather than something that's done on an ad hoc basis, a state by state level, something that's going to go and take millennia to go and resolve. No, we want to go and think about this in terms of 2030, 2040, 2050. And that's really where, as I said, OMA comes into play. So in 2023, we filed our incorporation papers and we really put our money where our mouth was in terms of creating an entity that's well positioned to go and advocate on behalf of the industry and its stakeholders as a whole with the different authorities out there to go and facilitate industry being created just as you would in terms of carbon collection, to go and do this regularly, predictably, and at scale. So I'll stop sharing right now and hand it over to our next presenter.
Thank you, Michael. That was very insightful, very interesting presentation. I was writing everything down. Thank you for that. Actually, I saw the very interesting the from each well that we know is abandoned, there might be 10 more that we don't know about. And I found that the work that we're doing all here together, bringing this type of carbon offsetting projects into orphan and abandoned wells could leverage actually or incentivize these not known wells to maybe report register somewhere and say, okay, here we are, and we want to pursue this opportunity. That could be very interesting.
Absolutely.
Yeah, okay. No, with no further delay, let me introduce all of you our next speaker, Sam Arnold. Sam is the co-founder and COO of Carbon Path, with over 2 decades of experience spanning the engineering and financial sectors of the energy industry. Recognizing the pressing need to address climate change, Sam leveraged his expertise to pioneer solutions in the voluntary carbon offset markets. Through Carbon Path, he champions the shutdown of oil and gas wells, aiming to significantly reduce greenhouse gas emissions while prioritizing societal well-being. His strategic approach combines financial acumen with environmental stewardship, embodying a commitment to meaningful climate action and industry decarbonization. With a track record of leadership roles in prominent firms like Citadel LLC and Brookfield Investment Management, Sam brings a wealth of experience to his role, driving forward impactful change at the intersection of financial and sustainability. So please, Sam, you're very welcome and happy to learn more about about the proposal from Carbon Path.
Yeah, thanks, Juan. Really appreciate everybody joining us here. And Michael did a great job of setting the stage of the problem. And just to recap, the first well was drilled in Pennsylvania in 1859. And since then, there's been about 4 million documented wells that have been drilled. And, a lot of them have been plugged, but millions have not. And if you think about the landscape today, a lot of people don't really know that we get 95% of our oil production from just 250,000 wells. So there's another 750,000 that are producing just very marginally, and another 3 million that are orphaned or idled and are at risk of probably never getting plugged. Now, all those have a pipe that basically run from the surface all the way down to the reservoir. And that provides a conduit for whatever's down there to leak to the surface. And not only surface, but also to the water table. So you could be contaminating the water with not only oil and gas, but also some of the bad stuff that comes with producing hydrocarbons, like hydrogen sulfide, like benzene, and other biohazards. So that's why it's really important. And as Michael pointed out earlier, that a lot of these wells are really close to where people live. And so not only is it a huge greenhouse gas, but it also can be contaminating the water, which a lot of people are drinking. So it's really important to clean this up. Now, when you start talking about those kinds of numbers, it takes pretty large equipment. It takes anywhere from $50,000 to $100,000 to properly plug the well. Now, if you start thinking about millions of these, the price tag could easily go over 150 billion. Now, the Biden administration recognized this as an issue, and they allocated $4.7 billion to this problem in the Build Back Better legislation. But as you can see, a little under 5 billion is nowhere near the 150 billion that will be needed to actually clean up this problem. And so we think it's just paramount that somebody does something about this. And so where is that going to be financed? And we came up with the idea using the voluntary carbon offset market. Now, we think, as Michael indicated, it has a lot of positive attributes, because if you think about the relative range of carbon projects that you can do today, it can either be picking, CO2 directly out of the air through direct air capture. And when I was at Exxon, one of my specialties is sour gas treating. So actually picking CO2 and hydrogen sulfide out of natural gas. It's very difficult to do. It requires the right temperatures and pressures. So that's why a lot of carbon capture and sequestration, as well as direct air capture projects, are quite expensive, finding those point source loads. So we think this can be done relatively cheaply, around $20 a ton, $20 to $30, depending upon the area and the leakage. And then the second part that we talk about is like the additionality. Obviously, there's very limited government financing. There aren't solvent oil companies or operators to go do this work. The landowners can't afford it. So it really is incumbent upon some other solutions. We think it's purely additional. If done properly, it's permanent. You're taking away that pathway from the reservoir that could be anywhere from 2,000 feet below the surface to 2 miles below the surface, and permanently filling that with cement. And then the leakage question comes from, well, is this going to just pop somewhere else? We'll basically do reservoir engineering and think about the reservoir itself as being almost like a sidewalk, like cement, and the oil and gas trapped inside there. So it doesn't just flow for miles and miles and miles. There's a pretty contained area of which it can drain, and such that if you plug that pathway, the chance of that molecule migrating is pretty slim. So we think it also, so it's permanent, it's additional, there's little leakage, and it's very verifiable. So one of the nice things about the oil and gas industry is it's pretty highly regulated. So you can use EPA methodologies to measure how much methane is coming out of the well. You can also, when you plug it, you have to get the approval of the landowner. So you're getting buy-in from different constituents, and it comes with a state permit, and that site is inspected by either the state or federal government. So we don't know of any other carbon credit that comes with a permit attached to it. So we think those are very beneficial. Why us? I'm going to share my screen and show what we are doing. Let's see, here we go. So we have created a Web 2 interface for Web 3. And as Michael showed, this is a similar map of all the wells in the United States. It also shows where we're doing projects. So we have some orphan and abandoned projects right now in Louisiana and in Colorado. And if you look at a project that we completed in Montana, this was closing a well that was marginally producing. Now, you might say, what's additional about that? Well, this well could have been sold for $20,000. It has a market value. We convinced the operator to say, don't spend that $20,000, or don't collect that $20,000, but go ahead and spend $100,000, because this is a big well pad. This is a huge 2-mile lateral well. So this is on the far end of expense, $100,000 to plug. So this operator is out $120,000 for doing this well. So there has to be some sort of financial incentive, because if they would have sold it to somebody for $20,000, it would have been produced for probably decades longer and then eventually left as orphans. So they're kind of at risk. So what we're showing right now is some basic information on it. You could just watch a video, but we have all this data that's directly on chain. So you can know the exact lats, longs, everything about the well. And then more importantly, when the credit was created and where it presides. And then this IPFS link, which attaches to all the data that you would need, such as the state permit, the reserves, the wellbore diagram, the gas and oil testing, and the methodology summary. So everything that you would need to recreate the credit. We also have some before and after pictures, so you can see what the site looked like before and then after. So we think that's really what the market needs right now, is to be able to have some clarity around the projects, because I know when I was first looking to buy carbon credits for my own account, I felt like I didn't have any transparency, and there might have been hundreds of pages of validation and verification documentation, but it wasn't anything that I could actually go out and check myself. And I think providing all this information, I think anybody with a little bit of knowledge can go and do their own due diligence and feel good about the credit. And that's really what we're trying to create. So I am going to stop there and hand it back over.
Thank you very much, Sam. And actually, you already gave us some hints about additionality with the rough numbers about the 20,000 and 100,000. Like, why it is important to invest. And actually, I would say a big opportunity for those numbers you mentioned about having more than 3 million maybe orphan abandoned wells, and a lot also in the hundreds of thousands that are marginal operational. So very important to learn more about that, because with carbon path and this new methodology, what happens is that there is an opportunity for all these people to engage in the carbon offsetting market with additionality, with leakage prevention, and with all the supporting evidence, as you showed us in the platform, like all the supporting evidence that really shows you how the orphan and abandoned wells was closed, and that's actually what we need right now to build trust in the market. So thank you very much for that insightful presentation. And yeah, now let me introduce you our next speaker, Sinat Iqbal. Very important to have a chat with her to understand then later how the market would look like. And Sinat is responsible for market research, client development, and assisting with structuring carbon transactions at ACX. I don't know if you know, but ACX, formerly known as Air Carbon Exchange. Before joining the team, Sinat spent over a decade as an attorney in aviation and financial services, and most recently spent several years at the United States Department of Transportation working on regulatory compliance and policy matters. Sinat earned her master's in law with a specialization in international business from the National University of Singapore, holds a Juris Doctorate from American University Washington College of Law, and a Bachelor of Science in Commerce from the University of Virginia. So, Sinat, we're so happy to have you here. Specifically, I have been waiting a lot to learn more about the market, how the market perceives this type of units. So, please, I leave you to it.
Thank you very much, Juan. And thank you very much to Michael and Sam for setting the stage here. My presentation and discussions will be a little bit more 30,000-foot view. As Juan mentioned, I work with ACX, which is a global environmental commodities exchange. We are the only regulated exchange that trades carbon offsets, voluntary offsets, and we are based in Abu Dhabi. I myself am based in Singapore. The market, the carbon markets and the exchange actually plays a very big role. Now, again, I said I was going to take a 30,000-foot view of this problem. Michael set up a very clear idea and clear vision of what the problem is that we are facing with orphaned and abandoned wells. And Sam put out a very comprehensive plan to say, okay, well, this is the opportunity for us to create financing streams and create opportunities to create alternatives for wells instead of continuing to operate and a marginal capacity into converting them into carbon credits into the market. But the last piece of that is how do you get to market? And that's where the exchange comes in. Both Michael and Sam have highlighted the challenges within this kind of field. And particularly Sam highlighted some ideas, some concepts around transparency, not being able to see the market for what it is, not being able to see the transactions, the pricing, understanding the value that it creates. And in order to build not just a scalable market, but a sustainable market to meet these global demands, you have to have transparency and, more importantly, trust. And we look forward to working with orphan well projects and going forward to kind of create that opportunity for these projects to come to market. Just want to highlight a little bit here. What is the situation today? Again, from a more global markets perspective, we read in the newspaper and hear in the news every day. There are governments talking about, net zero commitments, ensuring that we don't overshoot 1.5 degrees Celsius by a certain period of time. We hear about the Paris Agreement. We hear about Article 6. Most of us in this industry hear about this quite a lot, but even if you're not in this industry, you hear about climate change and these net zero pledges every day. But what we don't hear about is how we actually get there. What this will take is, from a buyer's perspective, from a demand perspective, real transformation. And we're trying to transform that. The idea behind offsets is it's not, I think offsets in the market have gotten a little bit of a bad name, but essentially what offsets does is it forces businesses to say, okay, if I'm going to use offsets to meet my climate mitigation requirements, it's going to cost me something. And that cost, as demand increases, will increase as well. And the idea is that instead of spending that money into with carbon offsets, the idea is to use that then and say, okay, and instead of putting $100,000, $200,000 into offsetting, let me now start shifting that into building technologies or building operational procedures to shift away from basically decarbonize. And so the idea behind the market, behind the exchanges, is to create those opportunities for the market to realize that this costs money. But on the flip side, for project developers, similar to what Carbon Path is doing and what other orphaned and abandoned well project developers are facing, is that this costs money. How do we get that money? How do we finance these projects? We have to go to the market, and there has to be an efficient way to reach those prices. If you may value each carbon credit at X dollars, you have to have a buyer on the other side. So instead of going, typically the way markets work, you have to get on the phone, call a broker, or talk to a buyer directly, have these one-on-one negotiations where you don't actually get to see your options. Whereas if you think about going to a grocery store or think about going to a retail store, that you've got for your groceries, you've got options to buy particular types of apples or other types of apples. Having a transparent market helps buyers make better decisions. It helps seller price and gauge the market in a more appropriate way. So what ACX does is that we create that opportunity for buyers and sellers to come together in a very transparent platform, in a way that is efficient, cost efficient, and time efficient. What we're trying to do with ACX is create what's called a global liquidity pool. Now, what does that mean? It means that buyers across the world can come into a marketplace to buy and sell, and for project developers to in particular to show their offerings and solicit bids. This creates a very direct stream of financing. But what it also does is it creates a foundation for future financing. Once buyers start to get used to certain types of credits and get to see different types of credits and new types of methodologies like this, like the methodologies being formed around orphaned and abandoned wells, is that they will then start to kind of invest more into future credits, offtake agreements. Instead of saying, okay, I want to buy it for today, instead they'll start saying, okay, we want to put money in and finance for the future. The value of exchanges, and in particular ACX and ACX in particular, is it creates this kind of culture of trust. A couple of things just to highlight what ACX does, but I'll also come back to more broader markets in general. One of the key things is about trust. Sam mentioned that as well. How do you know that the projects you're investing in are, meet the requirements? How do you know that the transactions are meeting have sufficient oversight? ACX is a global regulated exchange. We have oversight over a governing body, and we hope that this will be the first opportunity for exchanges to grow globally under a regulated manner. We have a digital infrastructure. Sam, in particular, mentioned, and I know that Eco-Registry's highlight is their blockchain foundation. The digital infrastructure that we're building creates, again, not just the transactional opportunities, but also the opportunity to build on all of that metadata. We envision a future where you can actually look at the project that you're particularly going to buy, or perhaps you own, and see all of the metadata behind it. This is where that digital infrastructure can help to really create transparency and trust in the market. The platform we have will enable the connection of multiple, not just for carbon, for other commodities as well, but again, it helps to bring a global reach of buyers and sellers together. I'll just skip forward a little bit as well, just to highlight some things about ACX and some fast facts in terms of our partnerships. We have global partnerships. One of our partnerships is in the United States with a company called Rebellion Energy, and with ACR, American Carbon Registry, as well. So we work with different partners, and through this we have learned about the the importance of the orphaned well industry and the importance of bringing these to market. We offer a number of different products. One is a spot exchange where we have what's called a commoditized product, where you can create, for example, a orphan well product, an orphan well credit, where you could buy it and trade it on the exchange. This again creates not only an immediate stream of financing for project developers, but also creates that tradable product that can increase the future value of the credits. For immediate interest, we have something called a carbon market board, where buyers can come and access these projects immediately. You'll get to see the options of what types of carbon credits are out there, do your own due diligence and value proposition, determine where you see value in the projects as well. Quick highlights again about what the exchange brings, but I also want to just take a minute to pause the presentation and talk a little bit more about the market for these orphan well credits. And I think I'm going to stop presenting if that's possible. Yes, thank you. The way the market works currently is that the typical methodologies are perhaps nature-based or perhaps renewable energy. This is a new methodology. This is a new type of carbon offset project that the market is still learning about. And because of that, it's going to take a little bit of time for some of that scalability for people to start buying into it. The market in the last 2 years has been subject to quite a bit of scrutiny. A lot of integrity questions have been raised and it's just about the market trying to realign itself. So Michael pointed out that there are 4 or 5 things that the market is that most buyers are looking for, and one of them is measurability. These particular projects are incredibly measurable because of the nature of the technical nature of the way these wells are plugged. This can be quite appealing to the market. However, there are still a lot of questions that we are working through, and we are happy to help the market understand through webinars like this. And we invite all of the questions to come through, because again, a consumer or a buyer or an entity that has demand is making better decisions if it knows more about the particular projects. I'll pause here, in case there are any questions, but we can also, have a conversation one if that makes sense to you.
Thank you, Zeynep, and especially for all those interesting insights about at the end about how this new type of units is, since it is new, the market will be still learning about it and will be still start to understand what it is, how to get it, or actually what are the pros and cons of getting this type of offset. So that's very important. But I want to relate with you with the measurability. It's very easy to measure. It's very easy to understand. Actually, it's very straightforward to quantify. So with these closing remarks, I want to invite all our panelists to join us again to have like a small discussions of some of the questions that have already been on through the LinkedIn Live and the YouTube live session. The first one, and I don't want to let the time go without answering that question, would be about orphan wells, and some people understanding, or some of our viewers understanding, there are also reports about the possibility of obtaining lithium from those abandoned wells. And how do you perceive this as, since they are emitting greenhouse gas emissions, like how do you see this opportunity, since lithium is also another important resource that we will need, especially for electric vehicles and other implementations? I don't know if any of you, maybe Michael, has some remarks around that.
Yeah, I mean, I think one real world example that we're seeing right now is Exxon over in Arkansas going and doing some work around securing lithium in a brine form from wells, because they're in the commodities business, and Exxon is not doing this out of the kindness of its heart. More likely than not, they have a fiduciary responsibility to their shareholders. They're doing this because there is a probability that meets their threshold that says this is going to go and be something economic for them to go and do. I think the thing with orphan wells is this: we have limited information on them. They are underloved, hence the name. But I think that's an opportunity here. And I think what we're trying to go and do in this domain is actually start changing the perspective such that people are viewing this as a commodity. The oil and gas industry is tremendous in terms of its competency as it relates to going and managing risk, and then going and doing some really, really cutting edge and leading edge things in terms of extracting hydrocarbons for a long time. And, it's understood that the laws permit this. Plugging wells is, in a sense, viewed as a cash outlay, something that's going to go and reduce the economic viability of the well. So if I can go and push this out legally and compliantly as long as possible, that's what I'll go and do and that's what some businesses have actually, been structured to go and do at scale. I think one of the things that's really interesting that we have discussed at the Orphan Well Management Association is this idea of, something that's public or private, implicitly or explicitly, where you have $4.7 billion. States have been allocated these funds, will be allocated more of these funds. Is there an opportunity to actually go and create a project where you're actually going and doing a more robust geological analysis of these documented wells, and then those that are actually going to go and be discovered and hence become documented thereafter, bringing them into the fold? And if lithium is an opportunity, the thought is, hey, that's fantastic. These wells don't need to go and be plugged. If there is actually something to go and be done that's actually going to go and be value creating and good for the world at large, taking into account the different negative externalities as well as the positive externalities. I think you have to go and be mindful of the integrity of these wellbores when you're, thinking about this as a business opportunity. But where we are today, we're just scratching the surface in terms of collection of the data and synthesis of the data, such that we can actually go and make an intelligible decision in terms of whether or not to go and pursue something like this on a one-off basis at a pilot scale, or at a economic and business scale thereafter.
Thank you, Marco. And I want to actually, I found it interesting that you mentioned that there is not enough information yet about these orphan and abandoned wells, that we need to do more measurements about them, understand what it's actually down there, and how they would react, or yeah, what would happen if we do something with what is down there. So, and understanding that the oil and gas industry has the potential to deploy leading technologies. I don't know if Sam has something to add on the measurement systems, what you're doing, how it is it innovative? Because those measurements are the ones that will support actually with evidence everything that is happening when closing those orphan and abandoned wells.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just add that, the Environmental Protection Agency in the US has been providing a lot of guidance. There's been a huge influx of new technologies that have come about with, either imaging cameras, satellites, various different things, with drones to be able to go out and measurement. So the first thing is you got to find the leak and then measure the rate, and then have some sort of assumption of how long that's going to continue. I think maybe how long it's going to continue is up for debate. I think you can get some pretty accurate measurements of what it's leaking today. However, you're talking about a pretty small differential in pressure between the reservoir and surface. Most of that has a huge hydraulic head of water on it, water column. So the gas is bubbling up through intermittently. But we do know that, as things corrode, it usually doesn't get better unless there's a scaling incident. So for the most part, if there's, like I said, a conduit where there's been a failure through corrosion between surface and the reservoir, that's only going to continue and get larger. And maybe something that people don't understand about the oil and gas industry is if you have a great recovery, you might get 50% of that original gas in place. So having a really small leak that's going to continue for years and years isn't actually going to do much to your total recovery factor. So you get the majority of that production really in the first, call it 10 to 20 years. And then after that, it goes asymptotic and it produces for long periods of time at a very low level. And so the leak rate is even smaller level than that. So when you start to think about, these things leaking for 20, 50, 100 years, it's a relatively rational calculation to make, but it's just something the market hasn't necessarily seen before because they're not used to, dealing with the industry. But, these molecules took millions of years to develop, and they've been there for 100 million years. And if we take away that pathway, they'll be there for 100 million more. And that's all I'll say there.
Thank you, man. Very, very, very good. Because yeah, actually, I am learning a lot, and every time I learn more about orphan and abandoned wells, I understand that I don't know enough, and that actually there is a lot of things there to discover. And actually, that's something that I want to discuss maybe with Sina, since how have you been? Because you mentioned the importance of bringing the learning to the market, so like getting the market to learn about these types. How do you see the perception right now? That I believe these type of units have been very few years, actually months on the market, I would say. But how have you seen the acceptance? What are the worries from the market? Why do they ask you when they say, okay, here I want to buy a carbon offset that comes from orphan abandoned wells, buy it, my worry is this. So
Yeah.
what would you say are the main worries?
So a couple of the main, I think, concerns. Number one, okay, it is new. This is a very new method. For example, the ACR methodology is very new. This type of crediting process is new, and whenever you have something that's new, you can't rely on history. You can't rely on historical data. So there's a certain amount of assumptions. But the good thing here, one thing to really remember about carbon offsets is they're all forward looking. You're not trying to say, okay, I'm generating an offset to basically say that I've stopped something that happened in the past. Everything you're doing is stopping something in the future. So for these orphaned and abandoned wells, any type of offset that is generated is not retrospective. It's prospective. So you are stopping the emission of methane in the future. So while maybe you don't have a lot of historical data, the fact is that we know exactly what it is emitting today, and once it is plugged, you know exactly what it is not going to be emitting tomorrow. So I think that is really important. I think that goes to the point of measurability. But more broadly, what again, some of the questions that we get is a lot of basic understanding, or basic, like you and I, Juan, are still learning about this industry. I think Sam and Michael have a much more depth about the industry, but some of the questions are simple, like, well, why is it that the oil company that dug the well isn't responsible for plugging it? Or maybe there's like, well, shouldn't they have the responsibility? And it's a very important distinction of saying, and Michael made a very good point earlier, that these are orphaned. They have no parent, they have no guardian to take care of them, to ensure that they're no longer dangerous to the population and to the soil and to the earth. So I think that's one of the more simplistic questions. I think there will be more technical questions that come around the measure, how it's measured, how well they are plugged, what the process is of plugging. How do you ensure that these actions will actually lead to protection over time? So there will be questions that come about there, and I think the best point of conversation is with the project developers themselves. And I have seen an openness from the project developers to answer these questions. So I think that's kind of where we are in the market. It really is about education. And again, this forum provides a great launching off point.
Thanks, Sina. And that actually opens two follow-up questions that I believe Michael and Sam will have more information about. That one of them would be like, do we have like some data to benchmark like how many tons of CO2 equivalent are being thrown to the atmosphere on a yearly basis by a specific well, and how does it depend to, for example, does it depend on the size, on the where it is located, on the type of oil and gas that it used to have, something like that? That would be the first question that I have for you both, if you can answer two of them. Because actually in the, let's say in the other types of industry, there is like a relationship. Like if you generate energy, you have megawatts, and you know a rough number of how many units or how many tons of CO2 equivalent you are already avoiding in that case. But in this case, like if you have some data that you can share, that would be great. And the second question, a follow up, would be also like, since this is something that will be in the future, and that is something that I discussed a lot with Sam, will there be like a further verification statements like on a yearly basis that say, okay, the well is still closed, the well is not emitting, like some specific further measurements afterwards? Like those would be like my two questions for Sam and Michael, if you can bring us more knowledge about that.
Sam, if I could start out, first, and then I'll hand it off to you. I do want to go and bring this point to everyone's attention, is that we're talking about CO2 equivalents, and the oil industry at large has the habit of going and doing this, in terms of barrels of oil equivalent. And what we clearly understand is that not all barrels of oil equivalent are equivalent to one another. That's why, natural gas is trading at, a negligible amount right now per an MCF of energy relative to a barrel of oil that's continuing to go and increase in value. They have different purposes, different cost structures. When I think about this, I think a lot of these questions that are being brought up, these concerns, they're all germane and they need to go and be addressed. The thing that really intrigues me, though, about this space is that we're talking about methane. And, I agree with all the folks out there that on a 100-year basis, the global warming potential of methane is somewhere in the mid-20s to somewhere in the low 30s, according to different expert analysis out there. But on a 20-year basis, the thing that's intriguing about this and really motivating to me is that we're talking about something that has, mid-80s equivalent in terms of irradiative ability, global warming ability relative to a ton of CO2. And when I'm thinking about the bathtub, so to speak, that all these GHGs are going into, I'm not really concerned about if it's going to go and flood in 100 years. If I have certainty that it's going to go and be flooding tomorrow, or in this case, 20 years, if we're talking about that, GWP, sub 20 unit of measure. And I think there are a lot of things that are out there right now that are helping us have a better sense of the verifiability, the measurability, the permanence, the leakage, the additionality. And what I'd also go and say is that, the research tells us that is, if we're just looking at it from a methane perspective, we're talking about standards, of deviation. We have super emitters out there. These other wells are not emitting nearly as much. But the questions that we need to go and ask ourselves are, where are these wells relative to where ongoing oil and gas work is taking place? There was a really interesting article coming out of Texas recently where, because of, some of the fracking that was being done in the Permian, if I'm not mistaken, pressures were being changed within the reservoir. And once previously, thought to go and be inert and idle wells that were unplugged, suddenly were going and exploding and causing significant harm to ranchers in terms of their land becoming worthless. And that's one point of consideration. The other thing is, how close is this to a school? How close is it to a place of worship? How close is it to a hospital, et cetera, et cetera? These are all different factors that are going to go into making a decision in terms of where you want to go and plug, and some of the credits that can actually go and be generated from this. And I view that as a separate bucket from these other opportunities we were talking about in terms of going and saying, hey, there's a mineral here that's of interest, like in that methane example we were talking about. So I'd say those three things are what's most motivating and exciting to me in terms of the fact that it's methane, the fact that, a lot of these wells are in basins where there's ongoing oil and gas work, where something that's inert can suddenly become alive and volatile. And then, also having the opportunity to go and see needed minerals and other things of that sort being generated from this work to really go and help us create a more favorable environment for all the citizens of the world.
Yeah, thanks, Michael. I mean, maybe one of the things that I'll talk about too is there have been two studies, Townsend Small and Kahn, and those primarily focused on central kind of Appalachia. If you think about those were some of the earlier wells drilled anywhere from 1,000 to a couple thousand feet deep. So there's a pressure gradient in the earth. So the further you go down, the further the pressure is. Now there is overpressured environments and things of that nature due to geological history. However, just because you have a couple studies with a couple hundred wells, we didn't know what we were going to find. We've mentioned a couple times Rebellion Energy, which is doing great work. They're developing the projects and trying to make a return off selling the credits. One of our first project developers that we utilized is a big publicly traded oil and gas company called Civitas. And they adopted 40 wells just at random from the state of Colorado and said, hey, Colorado, what are some wells that you don't have funding for that you think is a problem? And they said these, because kind of as Michael pointed out, hey, they're around the Denver airport. This is kind of a problem for us. So we didn't know what we were going to find. And in fact, half of them leaked nothing. And that's when we went out to measure them. And others actually leaked quite a bit. And as we've been out there, we've been getting people coming to us saying, hey, I found this well where you can physically hear it leaking methane. So I understand some of the questions of, hey, how much is this going to leak? Is it going to be 1,000 tons? Is it be 5,000 tons? Is it be zero? It's going to be all over the board. And when you have 1 million, we think it's going to be kind of a Pareto distribution where you're going to have, call it 5-10% that are going to be high leakers for a number of different factors, whether it's like some sort of casing issue or downhole failure, or just historically how deep this was. So some of the wells have been drilled, 10, 15,000 feet. I mean, first well I drilled in Mobile Bay was 28,000 feet. So it can be all over the map. And that's really going to drive this. So it's hard to do rules of thumb, but it is pretty easy to go out and actually measure one. And so, the people that are chasing this right now from a project standpoint are highly incentivized to go out and measure, thousands of wells and then pick the ones that are the highest leakers to go have as their project, right? That's going to make the most sense. And it aligns well with what the climate needs too, right? Let's go get the worst offenders first. We have our methodology where we try to make it a little more incentivized, where if you found those, let's give you some minimum crediting for the others, because you're going to have a rig on site, you're going to have everything there mobilized. That's a big part of the cost. Give people a little bit of a credit to plug the second and third, because at the end of the day, and somebody else pointed out, you need landholder approval. To get a permit to do this work, the landowner has to say yes. The middle owner has to say yes. So everybody has to be aligned that this is a good idea. So for our marginal one, you could say, oh, well, why would that be in the landholder's best interest as well as still producing? Well, it's going to produce, they're getting checks in like the single dollars, but they're going to have $100,000 liability, in 5 years. What's the best alternative for that landowner? Most likely they're going to say, let's plug it now and I'll forego some of that income because I don't want to have a problem with my land. They could devalue it, and that's where I really make all my money. So I think everybody's aligned in doing this. And if there is misalignment, those wells aren't going to get plugged. So, I think this is one where you're not going to have a whole lot of people that are going to be battling with different issues to try to get alignment on a project. I mean, one thing I'll mention as well, Zinat said earlier that, a lot of companies want to do like forward contracts. Hey, I need whatever. But the nice thing about the oil and gas business, and this kind of goes maybe on your second question, is that if we have a plan, you can go out and plug 1,000 wells, and you can do that in a year, and you can deliver that on a pretty good schedule. So it's not like other types of credits where it might be, a 2-year of engineering and design, a 5-year build, and then a 10-year kind of capture after that. This can happen pretty immediately, all within the same year. So having quick hit projects that can be done today, I think is extremely beneficial.
Great. Now, I was noticing actually some of the most important points that you both mentioned. First of all, there is not enough information about the wells right now. There is not enough about how many wells, how many orphan abandoned wells there are there. And actually very important, and you just mentioned that at the end, Sam, the opportunity for scalability, like bringing this like in a broad area, like everyone doing this to solve a specific problem that is climate change. So this could bring a lot of emissions avoidances then in the future that can be avoided just by a matter of very fast deployment. So actually, such a mechanism that allows everybody to be incentivized to get some, yeah, some right, actually some financing to really implement these solutions. It's actually a key resource. It's a key opportunity for everybody. And yeah, uh, but now that we're here on this webinar, I do believe that there is an important need, as Sinet mentioned, to bring knowledge about the opportunity that is at hand and actually the need for implementing these type of solutions. So I would leave you just, since we are just at the end, I want to thank you all three for this interesting webinar and the team that made it happen, the team on the back working for it to happen. So thank you very much, and thank you all of three for these interesting remarks, for everything that you mentioned, and for sharing all this knowledge that is very important. And then also give you 1-2 minutes for each one of you to make a closing remark.
Juan, thank you for the opportunity to go and speak here today. Thank you to your team. It was great working with them. To Sam and Zinat, pleasure speaking with you as well, and look forward to going and speaking with you much more in the future. As far as the Orphan Well Management Association is concerned, we're in our infancy. We welcome folks that have questions to go and reach out to us. We welcome folks that have ideas to go and reach out to us. We welcome folks that are interested in becoming members, because after looking at that stakeholder chart, I think there's a place for them in this ecosystem to go and reach out to us. This is a big opportunity. If we view this as a commodity, we know that the oil and gas industry is incredibly good at the commodity business. We know that states have regulations in place to go and deal with these commodities. This can be the next big opportunity for them, and it could go and do a lot of good in terms of job creation, health improvements, and a variety of other things to go and create, better, outcomes across the board. So I'll leave it at that.
Sure, maybe I'll go next. Yeah, happy to have this discussion. Thank you, Juan, for setting it all up. Pleasure to be here. Once again, I'm available to discuss this at any time. You can look us up at carbonpath.io. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on We Don't Have Time. So if you have specific questions or want to talk about anything, I'm happy to do so. I think it's a very important issue that just needs to be addressed. If you want to do something today that's going to have significant impact on climate change and do it in a manner that's not going to impact anybody's lives really in totality of the way they live every day outside of the oil and gas industry, I think this is the lowest hanging fruit.
Thank you. Thank you, Eco Registry, for organizing this. As I mentioned, the real key to unlocking these solutions is having these conversations. So I certainly appreciate being invited here. Thank you very much to Michael and Sam for setting the stage as well for this conversation, and for all the work that you do in the market as well. I think my closing thoughts are just, this is one piece of the problem. It is a big piece, and it's, as Sam mentioned, low-hanging fruit. These are the types of projects that we can engage in to really make a dent in the climate crisis. And the extent that exchanges can support these types of projects and these types of transition mechanisms, we're happy to do so. Happy to talk to anyone about the projects that we support, about the exchange infrastructure, and how we are helping create scalable solutions for the climate crisis.
Thank you, Sin and Sam, Michael, and thank to all the viewers that we had today. So happy to see you again and happy to connect through our social network, LinkedIn, YouTube, or just going through to our website so that you can learn more about Eco Registry and what we do. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.